Hey, Jeremy Crow here. In this video I wanted to go over why I don't believe in astrology. But first I wanted to mention that this weekend, just in a couple days, is Flambeau Noir. So this is the International Left-Hand Path Conference that's happening in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada on April 28th to the 30th of this year, 2017, in case you're watching this in the future. It's going to be awesome. So I'm really looking forward to it. There's still some tickets left. You can even get day passes at the door as well if you only want to go to one event, or one day. Or you can still buy a full weekend pass, but there aren't too many left. You can go to flambeaunoir.com, which is FLAMBEAUNOIR.com. So, another interesting thing that I wanted to mention was that on the radio today, they're talking about a woman in Toronto here who climbed up a crane and has been stuck up there for a few hours. Apparently she's about 12 or 13 stories up, and I just thought that was kind of a funny thing because of the topic that I was intending on doing the video on today, being astrology, which has 12 or 13 signs. So maybe she was up there trying to observe the stars better with to get above the light pollution that's in Toronto or something. Probably not, but who knows. Anyways, so why I don't believe in astrology. So, I do actually utilize the symbols of astrology. So I use them like I would use the elements or the planets. So they are archetypal energies, and there's a sigil that's been ingrained, attached to that archetype for a very long time. It's built up quite an egregore, or thought form, you could say. And that's kind of momentum, symbolic momentum, you could say. So I do utilize the zodiac for occult purposes, but I'm not into the whole like birth chart kind of thing, except for as entertainment value. You know, I do kind of sometimes check my astrology thing. If I happen to see it, I'll read it sometimes, but I'll read other ones sometimes too, just to see if I can make that one apply to my life too. And generally you can make any of them apply to your life if you read into it. Which is interesting. You know, you can actually utilize that for benefit. If you're into that, you can definitely use the birth chart and have it trigger different symbol sets and archetypes in your mind, and utilize that to kind of come to a different, to make different connections, to come to some other, correlate different pieces of information that may not have been correlated in your mind. But I just don't believe in the objective reality of the zodiac having any kind of influence over your life the way that it's presented. Now let's go back to where this all came from. So the system of astrology that we have now is essentially this. It's almost identical to the system that was invented or utilized. Who knows if they inherited some of that from a previous civilization that was lost, or if they developed it themselves over a long period of time. But either way, we attribute this to the Babylonian astrologer priests. Now, these are the same people who utilize like a base 60 numbering system instead of what we normally use as a base 10. They called that, I think it's sexagesimal base system. And that's why we have 60 seconds in a minute and and all of that. 60 minutes in an hour. And they also had 12. 12 was another one of their really important numbers. They had these special numbers that they felt were symbolic, special to them, meaningful to them. So when they were observing the stars, they started, picking out patterns. This is kind of the same kind of thing that you do when you look up into the sky at clouds, or some of the same kinds of things that you do when you read tea leaves. A lot of different forms of divination utilize this pattern recognition thing that our brain does. So they did this with the night sky, and they believed that it was important to observe the sky and to chart down the movements of it, because it was so mysterious to them. Some of them even believed that the stars that they were observing in the sky were literal gods. Or spiritual beings. And, you even see a reflection of this in the book of Revelation of the Christian scripture, arguably Enochian in tradition. But you see there's a passage where they talk about how the dragon fell from the sky and his tail swiped and took a third of the stars with him. And that's kind of been interpreted as a reference to angels rebelling and following Lucifer, essentially, in modern folklore. So you see that as a reflection of that ancient belief that the stars were actual literal entities. And also in like theosophy and stuff like that, sometimes they'll say that in a future incarnation, if you evolve enough, then you could be reborn as a star and live, thousands and thousands and thousands, who knows how long, right? I'm not sure how long stars tend to live, but that's, one of the things that they say in theosophy. But anyways, they observed the stars, they recognized these patterns, which they referred to as constellations of stars, and they gave them names and such like that. And they realized that over the course of a year, over the course of a solar year, the sun rises against the backdrop on the horizon, against the backdrop of various different constellations, which we refer to now as the zodiac belt. The zodiac belt of stars are the stars that the sun rises on the horizon against the backdrop of the star. You can't really see the stars at that time, but they've calculated out that, well, that's what star it is. Those are what stars are on the horizon when the sun's rising. These are the constellations of the zodiac. Now, the sign that you think that you are when you say, oh, I'm a Capricorn, or I'm a Sagittarius, or whatever, this is the constellation of stars that the sun rose on the horizon against the backdrop of on the day that you were born. That's your sun sign. And I don't think that it has any bearing on your life, honestly. Especially because that's not actually what star it is. Surprise! Generally, in the mainstream form of astrology that we utilize today in the West is called tropical astrology. And it has nothing to do with what actual stars are in the sky, in what position they're in. Okay, so back to the Babylonians. So they recognized that there were these constellations. There were 13 different constellations that they picked out that they recognized that the sun moved through. And they didn't move through them in the same amount of time. So you have like Scorpio, or what we call Scorpio today, and the sun doesn't stay in that sign for very long. So what they did was they said, well, you know what? If we took Scorpio and Ophiuchus, and again, I'm using the modern words that we use for these constellations, but they said if we combine those two into one, and then we shift the other ones a little bit, we could make this, we could make 12 equal signs. And they can create an imaginary map or an imaginary border or boundary or whatever you want to call it. This idealized form of it, which would conform to their sacred numbers. So basically the 12. So they said, 12 is a much more important number to us than 13. Let's combine those two ones that aren't as long, and then just shift all the other ones a little bit so that they're all equal. And it's kind of like literally, well, not literally, it's it's kind of like the pie in the sky kind of thing. And I find that a funny way of referring to it because, pie in the sky is, a fantasy you can't reach, or, it's a delusion. So they created this pie chart in the sky that were 12 equal signs. And that's what we still use today. Now, the other problem, not only is it, fudged to be 12 equal signs instead of 13 unequal signs, not only is that, but in the thousands of years since the Babylonians, we haven't changed that. But the stars have changed. You may have heard of the equinox of the gods or the precession of the equinox. Precession means that, so Earth is on its axis, right? But the axis is kind of tilted. And then it kind of wobbles. There's this wobble, a very slow wobble. And this is what, if you know anything about like the Mayan calendar and such, one great year they talk about, there's like 72 days per degree and 360 degrees. 72 years, sorry. 72 years equals 1 degree of shift on that wobble. And so it's almost like 1 degree of that great year is a lifetime in a human, kind of. It's kind of neat how that works out. But anyways, so this changes the position of the stars as viewed from the Earth. So you may have heard that, in the past, it was Aries was the one that the sun rose against in the backdrop of on the spring equinox. And I know it's getting kind of complicated. It's very convoluted. But on the spring equinox, the morning of the spring equinox, people say that the sun rises in the sign of Aries. But if you actually look at the stars, it's not. It's more like Aquarius. And that's why people say this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. We're right on the cusp. Some people say we've gone past the line. Some people say we're not quite there. It doesn't really matter. It's such a long period of time that transition period is what's the important thing. We're in that transition period from the age of Pisces, the time period, roughly a couple thousand years, when the sun's rising on the spring equinox morning against the backdrop of that sign. So we're basically in the age of Aquarius now, you could say, or we're transitioning into the age of Aquarius now. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. That's what that means. And so the thing is, modern astrology says, oh yeah, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. It's the sign that matters, not where the star is in the sky. The sign. And the sign is not the constellation. The sign is basically this delusional, sorry to offend, this imaginary pie chart in the sky of this idealized 12 equal sign system that the Babylonians developed. It's not what the actual stars in the sky are actually doing. So you may, like, I looked mine up. I thought I was a Capricorn because the sign in modern Western astrology when I was born was on rose against a sign of Capricorn. But if you actually calculate it out scientifically, what constellation was behind the sun on the horizon when the sun rose on the day that I was born, it's actually Sagittarius. It's shifted by like a full sign at least. And depending on which sign, because like I said, they're not equal sizes. Actually, my wife, Candace, she's still a Leo, but she's on the cusp now. Or on the other cusp, basically. She was on one cusp, but now she's on the other. But anyways, it's not based on what actual location the stars are in the sky. Now, one thing you can do, if I was to get into astrology, in terms of birth chart and all that, I would definitely be utilizing the sidereal form rather than the tropical. The really popular tropical is what we use in most, like if you look in the newspaper or fucking Cosmo. But yeah, I would use, if you're into it and you want it to be, based on some sort of reality and not just completely made up, utilize the sidereal. That actually takes into account where the actual constellations are in the sky, and they don't try and make it into 12 equal signs. It's 13 unequal constellations of the zodiac, and that makes way more sense to actually base it off of what's actually happening in nature. That's why I don't believe in astrology. It's not reflective of what's actually there, So, yeah, I don't really know what else to say on the topic. Sidereal in India, they do a little bit. They're more focused on the sidereal a bit. So one of the things you could do if you're interested in that, you could look up the more Indian forms of, like from India. I'm not talking about Native American. The Indian system, they utilize. There's a lot more. It's more common to find. It's easier to find people doing sidereal. There are still definitely people doing tropical in India, but there's a larger school of thought that utilizes sidereal. So if you're interested in that, check out the sidereal, or just utilize the symbols for your magic, and utilize the archetypes. But you can add in Ophiuchus. That's the serpent bearer. Now, to me, one of the studies that I've done on Ophiuchus is that it represents essentially the healer archetype. This is where you get, like, Ophiuchus means serpent bearer, and you get this kind of proto-caduceus, where it's just a simple rod with one snake around it. And that's the original healing scepter, So really, the modern caduceus being used as a medical symbol, really it should just be the one snake on a stick. But that's another story for another day. So I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you want to support these videos so that I can do more of them, or increase the production value of these videos, then you can go on over to my Patreon account, patreon.com/Jeremy Crow. Subscribe to my channels here. My videos are ad-free on VidMe. That's vid.me/Jeremy Crow. If you want to get these videos early, subscribe to the $5 or more Patreon, and you'll get the videos on Wednesday instead of Friday. Share my videos around if you want to support me, but you can't afford to have a subscription. The videos are free. You just have to wait till Friday. There may be a couple exclusive videos for subscribers, but the vast majority of the content I'm putting out is for free. So, thanks. Appreciate you guys. And if you have any comments, definitely put it below. I'll try and check it out and reply to you. And have a great week. Thanks, guys.